The convention debates instead confirm this interpretation. There, while discussing impeachment, the framers repeatedly returned to the threat of presidential corruption aimed directly at elections, the heart of self-government. Almost perfectly anticipating President Trump, William Davey of North Carolina explained impeachment was for a president who spared, quote, no effort or means whatever to get himself reelected. Hamilton in Federalist 1 said the greatest danger to republics and the liberties of the people comes from political opportunists who begin as demagogues and end as tyrants, and the people who are encouraged to follow them.
The lead House impeachment manager again there, Representative Jamie Raskin, using the Founding Fathers to make his argument that Trump is dangerous and should be convicted in the Senate. My next guest has written quite a bit about the framers and why they set up the impeachment process the way that they did. Robert Alexander, professor of political science at Ohio Northern University, is kind enough to join us now. And Professor, there really isn't a lot of gray area when it relates to the Founding Fathers, both their fears and the remedy they set up here, because they didn't want to have, the equivalent of a king. They wanted co-equal branches of government. This is the tool they gave to the legislative branch.
Yeah, I mean, impeachment is something that is pretty spectacular. It wasn't something that they thought that they would want to have used frequently, but they did understand that there might be situations where we simply could not wait for the electoral process to take hold. In fact, as we saw with President Trump's first impeachment, they were super concerned about the dangers of foreign interference in elections, which is what we saw in the first impeachment. So they were also, kind of thinking about ways to prevent that, and the impeachment process was yet another means to do that.
We've used a quote, as many people have often heard, when Ben Franklin was asked when he emerged, what do we got? And he said, a republic if you can keep it. They were particularly worried about somebody using the presidency and abusing the presidency to retain power and then to become something bigger than a person elected to a term or 2 terms, whatever the case may be. This was specifically one of the concerns they had, an abuse of power to keep the office.
Absolutely. And George Mason pointedly asked, he said, shall any man be above justice? They were very concerned about, as you pointed out earlier, a tyrant. They didn't want to trade one king for another king. In fact, the concern really, and this came up in Bill Clinton's impeachment, is what happens when you have a president who's actually popular. You have to have a means to kind of prevent that popular prince from the Machiavelli standpoint or point of view, from maintaining their power and, kind of holding that power from the executive branch. The legislature needed to be fortified in some respects to protect us from the presidency.
And Professor, the argument that Trump's attorneys lay out is, hey, listen, this is unconstitutional because he's no longer president. He's out of office right now. It seems to me there's 3 pretty compelling arguments to that. Is one, and they said it today, what's the downside then if there's no remedy, if at the end he'll do anything to basically retain power? The other one is we've got precedent, and you can tell the audience in a second who that was when you go back to Grant. And then the third is he was impeached as a sitting president in the House. The trial phase was just put forward with Republican blessing till this point. So the facts aren't on the side here to say you can't do this to a guy who's no longer sitting in the Oval.
Yeah, well, and there is precedent for kind of preventing somebody from holding office even after they've held that office. The idea really is that this is not truly a legal remedy. This is a political remedy, but it's also in part a legal remedy. They felt as though, when I say they, the framers felt as though, when we're looking at our public officials, they should be held to standards that are higher than the standards that you and I have, and because they're holding a public trust, they're holding a public office, and there's lots of ways to abuse that trust and to protect us again from rogue individuals, whether they be civil servants, whether they be federal judges. So if we kind of take a look back in American history at who has been impeached and who's been impeached and removed from public office and barred from serving as in public office. Federal judges make up all of them, 8 of them. Over the history of the United States, and they've been impeached and removed for all kinds of reasons. And frankly, the kinds of things that President Trump is charged with in this impeachment, insurrection, and we really, we use the term unprecedented a lot, and we've used it a lot in the last 4 years. But I think if you would have told anybody that you would have throngs of his supporters charging the Capitol building, interrupting the Electoral College vote, murders happening as a result of that, hundreds of injuries occurring. Washington, D.C. still is somewhat in a militarized state as a result of it. I don't think anybody could have imagined that to that level, to that extent, certainly a few years ago. And frankly, and this is another big issue I want to point out, Richard, is that the framers, they weren't looking at political parties. And if Donald Trump had a D on his back instead of an R, Republicans would be foaming at the mouth to remove him from office. It's really turned into a partisan issue, which the framers did not anticipate. So the process that they created is one that kind of evolved in a way that is maybe not as effective as they would have imagined because of the two-party system, and also because senators at that time, when the framers created the Constitution, were not to be directly elected, but elected or selected by state legislatures. And now that they're directly and popularly elected, they're very concerned about kind of stepping out of line with public opinion. And you're certainly seeing that in the last 2 impeachment trials, but even with Bill Clinton's impeachment trial as well. So the process they created really has not worked as they anticipated, especially when it comes to the presidency.
Professor Alexander, I appreciate a few minutes with you. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Richard.
All right, folks, when we come back, I'm going to go back to the floor of the Senate today. Highlights from Trump's impeachment trial as day one kicks off, and we get a better idea how each side will present their cases.